You know what I never gave a second thought to for most of my woodworking life? The scrap bin. I'd finish a project, sweep the offcuts into a bucket, and once that bucket got full, most of it went straight into the burn pile or the trash. I figured that was just part of the process. You buy more wood than you need, you use what you use, and the rest is waste. Then, about 4 years ago, I got the chance to spend time in a traditional Korean woodworking shop outside of Seoul. And the first thing I noticed wasn't the tools or the joinery. It was that there was no scrap bin. Every single offcut, every little sliver and wedge and strip was sorted and stored like it was inventory. Because to them, it was. These craftsmen were turning pieces I would have thrown away into inlay work, puzzle boxes, and decorative objects that sell for hundreds, sometimes over $1,000. And it wasn't some gimmick. It was a philosophy that went back centuries. Today, I want to walk you through exactly how Korean woodworkers think about scrap wood differently than most of us, and the specific methods they use to turn offcuts into genuinely beautiful, sellable work. Plus, stick around to the end because I'll show you a sorting trick I picked up over there that completely changed how I organize my own shop. Let's get into it. What we're really talking about here is one of the most refined zero-waste craft traditions in the world. And what makes it so valuable for someone working in a home shop today is that it doesn't require expensive tools or exotic materials. It requires a shift in how you see the wood that's already sitting in your shop. Once that shift happens, you start looking at your scrap pile the way these Korean masters do, as raw material for your next project, not leftovers from your last one. So let me give you some background on where this comes from, because it matters. Korean woodworking has a lineage that stretches back through the Joseon dynasty, which ran from about 1392 all the way to 1897. That's over 500 years. During that period, Korean craftsmen developed incredibly sophisticated furniture and decorative arts, things like soban, which are small personal dining tables, and ham, which are ornate boxes used for gifts and ceremonies. But here's what shaped their approach to materials more than anything else. Korea is mountainous, and historically, good timber was not as abundant as you might think. The government actually controlled access to forests during parts of the Joseon period, so craftsmen couldn't just go buy more wood whenever they wanted. Every board was precious. Every offcut had potential. On top of that, there's a concept in Korean culture called akida. It roughly translates to cherishing or conserving something, treating it with care because it has inherent value. Applied to woodworking, akida means you don't waste a piece of the tree because the tree gave its life for your work. That's not just poetic language. It's a practical operating principle. When wood is scarce and every piece costs you something, you learn to see potential in the smallest scrap. And that's exactly what these craftsmen did. They developed techniques specifically designed to use offcuts, not as an afterthought, but as a primary material source for high-value work. The beauty wasn't achieved in spite of the constraint. It came from the constraint. And once I understood that, it changed how I looked at everything in my own shop. The first method I want to walk you through is something so simple, it's almost embarrassing that I never thought of it. It's the scrap hierarchy. In every traditional Korean shop I visited or studied, scraps weren't just saved. They were sorted into very specific categories based on size, species, and grain character. There were bins for strips thinner than a 1/4 inch. There were slots for pieces between a 1/4 inch and 1 inch thick. There were separate areas for end grain offcuts, for pieces with interesting figure or color, and for clean, straight-grained stock that could be resawn later. One craftsman I watched had what amounted to a small library of scrap wood, organized by species. Zelkova over here, which they call nutinamu, a gorgeous hardwood with a grain pattern similar to elm. Paulownia over there, which they call odongnamu, an incredibly light, soft wood they use for box interiors and drawer bottoms. Persimmon, in its own section, because of its jet black heartwood. Jujube wood, which is one of the hardest and densest species in Korea, kept separate because even a tiny piece of it is valuable for accent work. What struck me was that this wasn't hoarding, it was curating. Every piece was clean, dry, and accessible, and the system meant that when a craftsman sat down to design an inlay pattern or plan a small box, he didn't start by going to the lumber yard. He started by shopping his own inventory. I came home and spent a whole weekend sorting my scrap pile using a version of this system, and I found over $30 worth of usable walnut, cherry, and maple that I was about to throw out. That was a wake-up call. The second method is where the artistry really begins, and it's the one that first made my jaw drop. It's a traditional Korean inlay technique. The broader practice of decorative inlay in Korean woodworking involves cutting incredibly thin strips and small geometric shapes from scrap wood and fitting them together into intricate patterns on the surface of a panel or a box lid. Think of it like a mosaic, but made entirely from wood offcuts. Here's how it works in practice. The craftsman takes scraps of contrasting species, say zelkova and persimmon, or paulownia and jujube, and resaws them into strips as thin as 1/16 of an inch, sometimes thinner. These strips are then cut into tiny triangles, diamonds, parallelograms, and rectangles, using a sharp marking knife and a small backsaw. The pieces are arranged into repeating geometric patterns, often inspired by traditional Korean textile designs or architectural lattice work. Then they're glued into a shallow recess that's been routed or chiseled into the host panel. The precision required is extraordinary. There's no room for gaps when you're working at that scale, but the materials are essentially free. Every strip came from a piece that most of us would have swept off the bench. One craftsman showed me a box lid maybe 8 inches by 6 inches that contained over 300 individual inlay pieces. The wood cost him nothing. The box sold for the equivalent of about $800. When I asked him how long it took, he said about 40 hours for the inlay work alone. That's $20 an hour in materials that came from his scrap bins. The skill is in the cutting and fitting, not in the raw materials. And that's the whole point. Now, if this kind of traditional knowledge is something you want to keep learning from, I have written a guide called Kenji's Workshop. It covers 100 ancient Eastern woodworking secrets that modern craftsmen have forgotten. The kind of stuff you will not find in most woodworking books today. Scan the QR code right now or check the first link below. All right, let us continue. The third method is one that has a real following among collectors, and it's the Korean puzzle box tradition. A traditional Korean puzzle box is a small, lidded box, usually somewhere between 4 inches and 8 inches long, where the opening mechanism is hidden. You might need to slide one panel, then press a specific spot, then tilt the box to release an internal latch. Some have 7 or 8 moves before they open. What fascinated me was watching a craftsman lay out all the parts for one of these boxes, and every single piece came from his scrap collection. The sides were resawn from zelkova offcuts about 3/16 of an inch thick. The internal sliding mechanisms were made from thin strips of jujube because its density and hardness mean the sliding surfaces stay smooth for decades without wearing. The decorative top panel was a small lamination of contrasting scraps arranged in a geometric pattern. The whole box used maybe a total volume of wood that would fit in your cupped hands, and when finished, it was a piece that could sell for $300 to $500, depending on the complexity of the mechanism and the beauty of the wood. Now, the fourth method is something I think every woodworker can start doing immediately, and it's grain matching across scraps. When a Korean craftsman pulls pieces from his scrap collection for a project, he doesn't just grab whatever fits the size he needs. He reads the grain of every piece and matches them the way you'd match boards for a tabletop, except he's doing it with offcuts that are 3 inches long. I watched a craftsman spend 20 minutes auditioning tiny scraps of Zelkova for a box panel that was only 5 inches wide. He was looking at grain direction, figure, color tone, and how the end grain pattern would flow from one piece to the next. The practical takeaway for your own shop is this. Next time you're about to glue up a small panel or a box side from scraps, slow down. Lay out every piece you have in that species. Flip them, rotate them, look at the end grain orientation. Arrange them until the grain flows naturally and the color transitions make sense. It takes an extra 15 or 20 minutes, and it's the difference between something that looks like scrap and something that looks intentional. The fifth method is lamination and color play, which is how Korean craftsmen build entirely new boards from old pieces. Instead of trying to find one perfect board for a project, they'll take 8 or 10 thin scraps of different species and laminate them together into a striped blank. Then they cross-cut that blank and rearrange the sections to create checkerboard patterns, herringbone effects, or complex geometric designs. A Korean craftsman might combine 4 or 5 species in a single lamination. Light paulownia, next to dark persimmon, next to warm zelkova, next to reddish jujube. Each species has a distinct color and grain character that holds up even when cut into strips a 1/4 inch wide. The resulting panels have a richness that you simply can't get from a single species, and every bit of material came from the scrap bins. The sixth method carries a beautiful philosophy behind it, and that's using scraps for joinery practice and teaching pieces. In traditional Korean workshops, apprentices don't practice on fresh lumber. They practice on scraps. Every failed dovetail, every test mortise, every experimental joint is cut from offcuts. But those practice pieces aren't thrown away either. The best ones become samples kept in the shop as references, and some become small display pieces that show the joint exposed so customers can see the quality of the craftsmanship. I started doing this in my own shop, keeping a shelf of joinery samples cut from scraps, and it's been one of the most useful changes I've ever made. Let me share some patterns I've noticed in my own work and in most Western shops, things this Korean tradition handles completely differently. The first pattern is the arbitrary size cutoff. Most of us have a mental threshold, maybe 6 inches, below which we consider a piece too small to save. Korean craftsmen have no such line. If a piece is clean and dry, it has potential. The second pattern is single species thinking. The idea of combining 5 or 6 species in one small object feels chaotic to us. But in the Korean tradition, multi-species work isn't chaos, it's composition. The third pattern is buying new stock for small projects. I used to drive to the lumber yard for a jewelry box. That's insane when your shop already has enough scrap for a dozen small boxes. The fourth pattern is skipping the finish on small pieces. Korean craftsmen finish everything with natural lacquer or perilla oil. A tiny off-cut box with a beautiful finish becomes a gift worth giving. The same box left raw looks like shop practice. Once you see these patterns, you can start shifting one project at a time. Now for that bonus tip I promised. This is a sorting method I picked up from a craftsman in a small shop south of Seoul. He used a 3-box system. The first box is for pieces with interesting grain, color, or figure. These are your accent and inlay pieces. The second box is for clean, straight-grained offcuts that could be resawn or planed into usable stock. These are your structural pieces for small projects. The third box is the only one that ever gets emptied, and it's for pieces with defects, checks, or paint that genuinely can't be used. The rule is simple. Nothing goes into the third box until you've honestly considered whether it belongs in the first 2. He told me that when he started this system, his third box barely filled up at all. I set this up in my own shop with 3 plywood bins labeled with painter's tape, and within a month I'd pulled enough material from the first 2 boxes to build 4 small gift boxes and a set of coasters without buying a single board. Before we wrap up, if today's video taught you something new, Imagine having 100 techniques like this at your fingertips. That is exactly what Kenji's workshop is. It is my collection of ancient Eastern woodworking secrets for the modern craftsman, all in one place, with detailed photos and clear instructions. You can get your copy by scanning the QR code on screen or using the link in the description. Thanks for being here. I will see you next time.